This is BBC World News Today. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Our top stories. A fourth person dies in Spain as floods, torrential rains and heavy winds batter parts of the country. More than 1,000 people have been forced from their homes. 10 of the Democrats hoping to run for president have debated healthcare, gun control and Donald Trump. We'll look at who came out on top.
We're at the races, that's where we are. We're going to get a deal.
Britain's Boris Johnson says he's cautiously optimistic about a Brexit deal as he prepares for his first face-to-face talks with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker next week. But he's still facing criticism for suspending Parliament.
Why are you not with them in Parliament, sorting out the mess that you have created?
Would you mind? I'm very happy to...
Actress Felicity Huffman is due to be sentenced in the US college admissions scandal. She admitted paying to have her daughter's exam secretly corrected. And coming up, Strike a Pose, the pictures that'll have you laughing like a hyena. The finalists of the Comedy Wildlife Photography Awards. Hello, welcome to World News Today. 4 people have died in Spain as heavy rain and flash flooding continue to batter the southeast of the country, shutting down regional airports and schools. Spain's meteorological office forecasts torrential downpours of up to 18 centimetres over 24 hours and warned that heavy rain was expected to affect parts of southern Spain and the Balearic Islands, including Ibiza. Olivia Crellin reports.
Without the tip of this road sign poking above the murky floodwaters in the southern village of Pilar de la Horadada, it would be impossible to tell that just 48 hours ago, what now looks like a major river was a motorway. Heavy rainfall in the southeastern regions of Valencia and Murcia have been sweeping away cars and debris and forcing the evacuation of hundreds of people as the River Segura broke its banks. This half-submerged van was the focus of rescue efforts, as elsewhere floodwaters claimed a third and fourth victim in the Andalusian cities of Almeria and Granada.
He had cut himself on the elbow when he broke his window to get out. Then he climbed on top of the car and he was all right when we found him, but he had contracted hypothermia.
Roads, coasts, homes, trains and airports have all been affected, leaving tens of thousands of people stranded. This includes tourists in Alicante Airport, as the area remains on red alert and authorities continue to recommend that citizens remain at home and avoid using their cars.
Nobody gets out here, everybody is stuck on the airport. And with us are 5-6 planes coming in, so everyone has 200 passengers. There are more than 1,000 people here stuck on this airport.
They cannot pick up their hire car, and the taxis have got the message from the police and the central not to drive because it's not safe. So the few taxis that are coming here, of course for money, but it's terrible. So the line here are, I don't know, perhaps it's many hundreds.
Military help has begun to arrive for those most in need. But while the extent of damage can be seen best from the air, the effects felt on the ground have left residents and visitors alike in a state of shock. Olivia Crellin, BBC News.
In November next year, the US will choose its next president. Who will take on Donald Trump for the Democrats is still unclear, of course. The front runner, though, as we know, is Joe Biden, former vice president to President Obama. And last night he faced 9 other candidates in a TV debate lasting nearly 3 hours. So what did it all reveal? Well, Sophie Long reports now from Houston.
A single debate in a single night.
The Democratic Party's top 10 presidential candidates meeting on the same stage for the first time. A different lineup, but a familiar dynamic. Former Vice President Joe Biden fighting to preserve his front-runner status as those trailing behind vied for attention. The first fireworks came on the key issue of healthcare.
For a socialist, you got a lot more confidence in corporate America than I do.
You got to defend the fact that 500,000 Americans are going bankrupt.
Gun crime is traditionally a toxic issue in US politics, but in a state where there have been 2 mass shootings in less than 2 months, this is what got the biggest cheer.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
Perhaps the most jarring exchange of the night was delivered by first-time candidate Julian Castro, and the topic was beside the point.
Are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago? Are you forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago?
He aggressively questioned the 76-year-old's memory. It was the youngest candidate
Against each other, poking at each other.
As front-runner, Joe Biden was always going to be the man with a target on his back, and his challengers came here with plenty of ammunition. But some candidates tried to emphasize areas of agreement and kept their greatest criticism for the man they all desperately want to beat, President Donald Trump.
Will be able to maintain his lead.
Absolutely, Lewis. He went into this debate as the front runner. Will he emerge as the front runner? We'll have to wait and see what the polls tell us. But it did seem as though, although he took a lot of incoming fire, he also took on his progressive candidates, his rivals who were either side of him, literally sandwiching him in that debate, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. What was also notable was how others tried to lay a glove on Biden, using his age against him. So Julian Castro, who's from the state of Texas, was in the Obama administration. He very much questioned Biden's memory and seemed to suggest that he'd forgotten details of his healthcare policy because he was old. When I caught up with Julian Castro this morning, I asked him if this approach had backfired, and he said absolutely not.
A lot of people that have said that they're glad that I pointed out that his plan would leave 10 million people uncovered. And, you know, he denied saying that people would have to buy into his plan. I was amazed that he denied saying that people have to buy into his plan 2 minutes after he had said that they would have to buy into his plan. That's why I pointed that out. That's a big difference because his plan would leave 10 million people uncovered and my approach would cover everybody. So, you know, whether it's Vice President Biden or it's somebody else, if somebody on that debate stage says one thing and then 2 minutes later they deny that they said it, I'm going to call them on that. And that's what I did.
Julian Castro there speaking to me this morning. Now, one of the viral moments from last night's debate was Beto O'Rourke, former congressman from El Paso, Texas. Remember, El Paso, of course, the scene of that devastating mass shooting earlier this summer where Hispanics were deliberately targeted. There's also been another mass shooting this summer in Odessa, Texas. So Beto O'Rourke has a position on gun control that distinguishes him from all the other candidates on the stage. He actually wants a mandatory buyback of assault weapons, and he said during the debate, we'll take your AK-47s, we'll take your AR-15s. Republicans are saying that this amounts to Democrats coming for Americans' guns, but Beto O'Rourke told me he does believe this is a policy that Americans want.
I'm listening to Republicans and Democrats and independents on this issue, and most of them want to see those guns returned. They don't want to see them in our streets. They don't want them to be used against us. So, yes, if we pass that law, it will be mandatory that you sell that weapon back to the United States government. But quick reminder, you don't need it to hunt. You don't need it for self-defense. You really only need it for use on a battlefield to kill people. That's what it was designed for. That's what it's really good at. It has no place in civilian life. So I believe that the majority of Americans understand that.
So that's the end of the third debate. The next debate is next month in October. What is the state of play? Joe Biden went into the debate with a comfortable, if narrowing, lead over Elizabeth Warren, and then with Bernie Sanders in third place. We'll see what the polling does, but the consensus among the pundit class, if you like, is that Joe Biden did enough to keep his lead, although it may yet shrink still further. Of course, the real test comes when Democratic voters go to the polls next year, starting in Iowa and New Hampshire, and then we'll get a real read on who is going to be the person to take on President Trump in 2020, Lewis.
Laura Trevelyan in the US there. Right, let's come to the UK now, because Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he is cautiously optimistic of getting a Brexit deal. He'll travel to Luxembourg on Monday, actually, for his first meeting since taking office with the European Commission President, that's Jean-Claude Juncker, and the EU chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier. An event in the north of England today, though, Boris Johnson told an audience that there's a rough shape of a deal in place for Britain to leave the European Union. Our deputy political editor, John Pienaar, reports.
The name's Boris Johnson. Trust me. It looks like campaigning, and it is, for future votes and for trust that he's the one to deliver Brexit. No more delays. An exciting time, he told one supporter.
Worrying time.
Not exciting, worrying, she said.
I think it's absurd.
Maybe worrying for him too, wanting a Brexit deal, attacked by critics for closing the Commons.
I'm all in favour of our MPs.
Why are you not with them in Parliament, sorting out the mess that you have created? Get back to Parliament and sort it out.
He's being heckled by the Commons Speaker too, who's warned of more laws to ban a no-deal Brexit, maybe force another extension.
Whatever the shenanigans that may be going on at Westminster, we will get on with delivering our agenda and preparing to take this country out of the EU on October the 31st.
What chance of a deal? He's hoping for a last-minute breakthrough.
I'm cautiously optimistic. How is that a good enough characterisation, Paul, of where we are? I'm cautiously optimistic.
He'll meet the EU Commission President in Luxembourg on Monday, still a long way from agreement.
Yes, we had a very good
His Democratic Unionist allies want to be convinced by a Brexit deal they see as no threat to the Union, and they haven't been.
We're not going to vote for any arrangement which makes us different than the rest of the United Kingdom and as a result forms a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom.
As far as the Irish government is concerned, our position hasn't changed, but I have to say what's been put forward so far falls very far short of what we would need.
So the chances of a deal still seem remote, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. It would certainly help Boris Johnson out of a tight political corner. If he's forced to extend Brexit, he could expose the Tories to a potentially serious threat from the Brexit Party. And now there's a law that could virtually outlaw a no-deal Brexit, lead to that very extension. Wanting a deal, even needing one, won't necessarily make it happen.
Good luck with Brexit, very much.
Where there's a political will, there's often a political way, but no one has found it yet. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Helen Catt is our political reporter. Anne is in Westminster, as you can see. Hi, Helen. OK, so what are we expecting from Monday then, first of all?
Well, Monday, Boris Johnson is going to meet Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the EU Commission. Now, he and the chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, this will be the first time that Boris Johnson has met them since he was elected Prime Minister. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. Expectation here is being downplayed about that. It's not being seen as some sort of breakthrough moment where a deal will be hatched. It's more just a sort of another meeting in an ongoing series of meetings that Boris Johnson has been having with European leaders like Angela Merkel, like Emmanuel Macron, in an effort to try and see if he can get a deal before the 31st of October, or before the 19th of October, in fact, at the end of an EU summit. And he has said today that he believes he is cautiously optimistic that a deal can be done.
OK, well, let's park the current Prime Minister for a minute. Let's go back to one of the previous Prime Ministers, David Cameron. He was, of course, in charge when this Brexit referendum was called, and he's been pretty quiet since then. But he's now got a book out and done an interview. What's he been saying?
Absolutely. This is his first in-depth interview that he's done with the Times newspaper here about his decision to call that referendum. And what's very interesting about this is that while he says that he worries people who will never forgive him for calling that referendum and others who will never forgive him for losing it, he insists throughout that it was inevitable. This wasn't a political choice. He says he believes it was inevitable that the vote had to be held. So he's still defending that decision to hold that. Interesting sort of that he's looked back after this and says that it does worry him, and looking forward to what the outcome is. He is positive. He says that a no-deal Brexit is not a good outcome, and he is quite critical of things that have been happening in Parliament in recent weeks and some of the ways that Boris Johnson has reacted.
Yeah, interesting there. David Cameron saying, right, no deal, not a fan, not in favour of that. And just take a step back for us, just for a second, for our viewers all the way around the world who've been following this, the kind of ups and downs, twists and turns. Are we actually closer to getting a deal that fixes any of those problems on the island of Ireland, or is a no deal now increasingly more likely? Where are we?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? There was some speculation in the newspapers today that the Northern Irish MPs, the DUP, might have changed their stance on whether or not they would accept a change to the backstop, this insurance policy, to try to make sure there aren't more border checks on the island of Ireland, that they might be willing to perhaps see some checks happen in the Irish Sea. So that was the speculation this morning. However, that has been sort of heavily squashed, if you like, by the DUP later in the day, who say that they would not accept any agreement which would treat Northern Ireland differently from the rest of the UK. So it's unclear where that has come from. It doesn't seem that has been any sort of breakthrough there. So there's still no sort of really concrete indication of what could move a deal closer. But Boris Johnson has said that he can see the sort of rough shape of one. So it'll be a case of watch and wait.
OK, thanks, Helen. That's Helen Catt for us down there in Westminster. And let's leave Westminster and see what else is taking and hitting the headlines around the rest of the world now. And the Swedish teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has joined hundreds of young protesters outside the White House to demand action against climate change. The demonstration marked the first high-profile event of Greta's 6-day visit to Washington. The idea was to pressure a sceptical Trump administration to tackle climate change. Paris Metro workers have walked off the job over plans for a major overhaul of the pension system, sparking huge traffic jams as commuters scrambled to find other ways of getting to work. 10 of the city's 16 metro lines were shut down completely, while services on most others was extremely disrupted. That's according to the city's transport operator. And the authorities in Indonesia and Malaysia have issued severe smog alerts as fires rage in large sections of their rainforests. Schools are being closed and face masks issued. Satellite imagery indicates almost 1,000 fires are burning in the Indonesian provinces of Kalimantan and Sumatra, while 10 are burning in Malaysia. Women in South Africa have been wearing black and taken to the streets today to draw attention to the growing rates of sexual violence, murder and rape. Newly released crime figures for South Africa show that sexual assaults are up more than 9% and rape more than 3% compared to last year. Our reporter Nomsa Maseko was in the crowd at the sit-in outside the Johannesburg Stock Exchange.
As a country facing a massive problem. Just yesterday, the government released crime statistics which have revealed that murder, rape and sexual assaults have all increased. Now, a recent spate of high-profile murders has got people asking, am I next? This protest is part of an attempted national shutdown which was organized on social media to highlight the issues of intimate partner violence and rape.
I'm here because I'm sick and tired of what's happening. I'm here because I want my voice to be heard as well. I'm here because I'm also part of the women that were killed. I might still be alive, but I'm dead inside because every day in this country as a woman we live in a nightmare. It's not ending. It's a nightmare.
It starts in the WhatsApp groups where guys share misogynistic, speak. It starts there, and it starts at home, and it starts in friend groups. And I feel like everyone needs to take action and really look at themselves, check their circles, check their privilege, and use whatever privilege they have to fight for those voices that are not being heard.
It's going to have to take, our generation of, the next parents and uncles, fathers, grandparents, etc., to bring people up the right way.
People here are angry. They want to stop the violence and they also want to see changes. But as things stand, very real and disturbing problem.
Nomsa Maseko there. Next, US actress Felicity Huffman will be returning to court in Boston shortly to be sentenced. The Desperate Housewives actor was involved in a plan to fix her daughter's exam results and help her get into good schools. Well, BBC's Gary O'Donoghue is with me now, as you can see. Gary, so when is she expecting to be sentenced, to hear her fate, as it were, and what kind of sentence is she looking at?
She's in court now. She arrived just a few minutes ago, looking a bit anxious, wearing a blue navy dress. I think she's with her husband, obviously the actor William H. Macy. Everyone will have heard of him as well. And effectively, the prosecution have been saying that what she should be sentenced to is a month in prison, plus a fine of $20,000 and some probation. Her lawyers have been arguing for no prison term. So the key thing, I think, will be whether or not she goes to jail at all. And in a sense, the jail term will be quite short, probably, if it happens. It could be a month, as the prosecutors have been asking for. But it will mean, if she does go to jail, that she doesn't get to go to the Emmys on Sunday week, when one of the shows she's involved in is up for an award.
And just take us back a bit.
Try and cheat the college admission system here in the United States. It's the university admission system. In her particular case, it's alleged she pays. She's acknowledged she paid £15,000 to a charity, really to have what they call the SAT scores of her daughter. These are the exam scores that universities look at for entrance, to be altered. Now, the accusations against other people vary. In some cases, some people are accused of actually getting different people to sit their exams for their children. But the prosecution argues that really this was a sense of entitlement by the rich and the wealthy, these Hollywood stars like Felicity Huffman, like Lori Loughlin, who's pleaded not guilty in her case, incidentally, but them, financiers, lawyers, believing their children deserve to go to the best universities and being prepared to pay in order to make it happen.
Yeah, and because of the celebrity nature, obviously, of some of the people involved, this caught the headlines across the country.
Only starting to be understood just now. It's not just an old boy, old girl network. It involves money as well in this particular case, and it involves some real kind of sort of planning and process. I mean, Felicity Huffman was not just dealing with one of her children. This wasn't an aberration. She was considering doing for a younger child as well, although that didn't happen at the end of the day. So it's not something that was sort of a moment of madness, although her lawyers have said that she was immediately repentant about it and has apologised and profusely and accepted her guilt.
OK, Gary, thank you very much. That's Gary O'Donoghue there. And of course, when we do hear the result of that sentence, we will bring it to you here on World News Today. Now, what do a chilled out chimp, a jolly owl and a dancing grizzly have in common? Well, it might sound like a setup to a children's story or one of my terrible jokes, but in fact, they're all finalists in the Comedy Wildlife Photography Awards. And the competition sees photographers from right around the world compete to find creatures in the most adorable and at times compromising positions. Well, earlier we spoke to Tom Sullum, co-founder of the competition, who told us what motivated him and his partner to set it up.
Very simply, I think Paul and I had got a little bit tired of the shock images, which are used often to raise awareness about animal conservation. And we decided there was the gap in the market for some humorous images that would possibly create a stronger link to these animals, human to animal. I think a lot of people get turned off by the images that we've seen of slaughtered elephants and rhinos, and those pictures have a place, but we felt there was another approach to raising awareness of animal conservation. So primarily, there's a photographic aspect to it. So it has to be sharp, in focus, correct depth of field, the highlight in the eye, the sort of standard expectancies of a wildlife image. The funny side is actually very difficult to choose. We have 9 judges, and we all put our scores together, and the winner literally has the most points. And our humours differ massively. We've got Kate Humble, who finds one thing funny, and Hugh Dennis, who finds something else funny. I find something, personally, my favourite this year is the penguin farting. It's childish, it's a little bit gross, but to me, it makes me laugh out loud. But there are so many variations. If I ask 5 different people their favourite pictures, you never get the same answer.
And if you've got any weird pictures of animals, send them to me on Twitter. I'm at L Vaughan Jones. I'm Lewis Vaughan Jones, and you're watching BBC World News Today. Bye-bye.